Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from lastcar.info coming at you after the conclusion of the Shriners Children's 500 at Phoenix. A tremendous battle to the finish there as Christopher Bell, pending the results of post-race inspection, has scored his third consecutive Cup Series win, the first time in the next-gen era that anybody has won three straight races in the points races on the Cup Series side, which is tremendous. And as Fox pointed out as well, first time a driver has won three of the first four races in a few years as well. So let's see what where things are going to be factoring in here coming up, especially during this stretch where you had three radically different tracks. You know, the pseudo super speedway at Atlanta, you had Coda last week, and now this one here. And again, especially really in all three cases, you had pretty close finishes and pretty decent races here for sure. I think that this was another great example. I think the option tire was something definitely that added an extra layer of complexity. We saw some comers and goers here, a little bit of more strategy factoring in there. And once again, the driver that was the most dominant of the day was not a factor in the finish. So I think that we had a good mix of what was actually happening in this race here as well. We'll talk about all that. We'll talk about the Cup Series race and the Xfinity Series race yesterday. We'll talk about the last place finisher battle on this. This certainly took some dramatic turns along the way. We got to definitely talk about the broadcast again. I'm already seeing some buzz about that on social media from some discussions there earlier today. And I definitely want to talk about the upcoming video that's coming to this channel here, my produced video on the history of Cartoon Network Wacky Racing. Just posted the trailer to that earlier this week. And we got a lot that's going on in the meantime, so we'll go ahead and jump right into it. First and foremost, tremendous battle there to the finish there between Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin. If you remember last year in the spring race, when they weren't using these tire compounds, Joe Gibbs Racing had completely dominated that race. All four of their drivers, back when Truex was still on the team there as well, had led basically about a quarter of the race between them, and Bell really kind of hit on the right combination at the end to cruise to a pretty easy victory by the end of that one. But the Toyotas looked like they really had the advantage in this one. In this race here, William Byron looked like he really had the hot shoe out there after winning the pole. Looked very good out there. But again, the tire strategy was a bit of a factor. We saw with Ryan Preece switching over to the option tires early in the race there and being able to jump to the front, like we saw with Daniel Suarez at Richmond when they did the different tire compounds out there as well. It was interesting to see. And I think this is something that a lot of people have been really anxious about, especially with Phoenix still remaining as the championship finale at the end of this year. Certainly been mixed results with that. I'll be interested to see what NASCAR does decide to do as to that November race, if they're going to just stick with the option tires or if they're going to have different combinations. I seem to hear somewhere that they probably weren't going to do the different combinations because they didn't want that to be a factor in the championship at the end. Who knows? I don't know if that's what they want or what they don't want. Seems like that changes by the week here. But they're certainly looking for something that's going to, put on an interesting show out there. I think the one aspect of this tire, this option tire that surprised the competitors in this was just how long those tires could last, even to the point where teams would switch off to the regular tires again and then even put on a set of scuff tires from it. That was kind of an interesting layer to this as well. And then other teams like Ty Dillon's, for example, that would just not use them at all and just kind of save them at the back. And that almost worked out for Dillon. Unfortunately, he had a pit road penalty at the end that dropped him at the back of the field there. And just an unfortunate deal. A lot of runs that we could have had some very surprising performances from some drivers. We indeed did have some. But then there were others that fell by the wayside. Ryan Preece kind of got cycled back there after leading for a portion of this race in the number 60 car. Got my Harris Lou shirt on out for today here, and turned out he had a good performance out there. But Ty Dillon, I was very impressed with their strategy, and he was even running pretty well before that and marching his way into the top 10. He's still shown, where is he in the results? 16th at the finish here, unofficially in the pending results here at the moment. So we'll go ahead and look at the rest of the results here. Christopher Bell leading Denny Hamlin. Hamlin with a very close battle there to the finish, reminiscent of what we saw in Saturday's Xfinity race, although kept very clean coming off the last corner. It really was just going to be a matter of whose was going to stick at that point or another. And it turned out fantastic for Bell. It could have just as easily gone one direction or another there, but I thought that was very enjoyable to see. And much like we saw in the Saturday race, it really opened the possibility of maybe even the third place driver becoming a factor there at the end of it as well. Kyle Larson was making a move there at the end and couldn't quite get up there. In fact, ran in the back of Bell coming to the stripe. Bell did a great job hanging on to it there in the middle of the corner and still holding off his teammate there in what is, again, unofficially, the second closest finish at Phoenix. Of course, the lead one being the Kevin Harvick-Carl Edwards battle back on the previous configuration there when the start-finish line was on the back straightaway. I guess you could say it's the closest finish since the current reconfiguration has been in place. A lot of records that are based on a lot of different conditions. I think it's always tricky to kind of unpack all of that in these stories, but I think that'll be another one to certainly look at too. But yeah, I was intrigued by the Gibbs dominance of this race last year, even though it didn't seem like till the end that Bell was going to be the best driver in that. But definitely in this case here, we saw a much more competitive race than maybe the statistics would show here. A lot of the field there shuffled even towards the end. Of course, the big accidents that happened in the first stage, we'll get into that there as well. But looking through more of the results here, Josh Berry, fine job out there in the fourth place finish. I'm seeing people mentioning it here in the chat. LJ Sparkles asking if Berry's going to get a win this year. I think that's very much a possibility. There's something about rookies being in that 21 car lately, whether it's Trevor Bayne or Ryan Blaney or more recently Harrison Burton, that it just seems like that car is just magic. It turns into the love bug or something out there. And it just becomes a big factor out there at the finish. We saw Berry run so well in Atlanta. Unfortunately, got involved in that accident at the final lap that forced the race to end under caution. But regardless, had a fine showing in that. And again, very strong in this race. And a track that's very tricky to get a good finish on. It's such a short race. It takes a very particular handling car that can survive going down on those transitions and so forth on the dog leg, and also be able to handle going around the track there at the same time. But a fine job that he did out there under the circumstances. Really had even a possibility of maybe getting an even better finish when the top three drivers were really coming to blows there on the final lap. So fine job by Berry. Chris Buescher in the fifth spot, the Thomas English Muffins machine there. Great effort for him. There was actually a graphic that was shown towards the end of the broadcast that Buescher's in the middle of a top 10 streak at Phoenix specifically these last few races. So it's good to see that get some attention there as well. And the number 17 car with a fine run. Byron, your pole sitter, has to settle for a sixth place finish here. And then going further back here, Alex Bowman, Kyle Busch, Zane Smith with a ninth place finish there for Front Row Motorsports. Fine job for them. He was kind of in and around the top 10 there towards the end, but actually was able to kind of claw his way back up there. Chase Elliott rounding out the top 10 there as well. So, again, very interesting mix of usual suspects that you would see up there and also some that maybe are less so there. It was good to see Zane Smith get a good run after he had so many in the number 71 car last year and having a fine performance out there. We did see the Spire Motorsports team struggle a lot more in today's race here. But on the front row side there, at least with the 38 car, another fine showing for them. I'm pulling up the results here on my phone because when I had the leaderboard on here, had the same issue we had last week in COTA where it wasn't showing the results properly. In fact, that became kind of an issue on the last place side of this too. We get into the accident portion of this broadcast as well. But talking about other good runs through the field, mentioning Ryan Preece ends up the 15th place finish ahead of Ty Dillon in 16th, and ahead of both of them, John Hunter Nemechek continues his strong start to this year, finishing 14th. Very nearly got a top 10 in this race. Was running around 9th or 10th there in the last couple of restarts there, shuffled the order a bit. We even saw his teammate Eric Jones up there for a time. Legacy Motor Club, again, they're not quite in that echelon of competing for wins yet, but still fine improvement in their performance here. This is, a track where, it would be easy to see them multiple laps down further back in the field, especially these long green flag runs. But they were really able to capitalize for whatever reason with this combination. I don't know what their strategy was with the tires there. It seemed like they were having option tires when a lot of the front runners did, and that kept them in that portion of the field too. But a fine performance they had there as well. Jones, in fact, showing the 18th spot, so both of them in the top 20 there. Fine job for both of them. Tyler Reddick with losing power steering. Seemed like he was going to be in the catbird seat at the end. they're mentioning him having a potential of, bolting on some fresher option tires there at the end. However, he ends up back in the 20th spot there at the finish. Perhaps a little bit too much to contend with there for him. Looking further back, we did have a bit of an exchange there for last place in the early laps of this event. One thing that we have to talk about here at the same time here is the situation with the number 78 team, the Live Fast Motorsports effort, and Catherine Legg being able to make her Cup Series attempt out there. Now, again, I have no problem with anybody out there that's trying to compete in the Cup Series these days. I think actually the Cup Series was at its best when it welcomed as many different drivers as possible, whatever their team's ability and whatever their background to actually compete out there. And it's always been pretty much a self-regulating circuit that, generally speaking, if you're not up to a certain level of competing in the Cup Series, things tend to work out in such a way that, you're not going to stay in there for very long. But there's a lot of drivers that along the way have been able to make their Cup debut, been able to make a few Cup starts out there and actually have some good shows out there. And then potentially, maybe those starts are just few and far between and so forth. The other thing with this deal here, hearing some of the reports coming into this, that this deal came together kind of last minute, and Catherine Legg getting this effort here in the Live Fast Motorsports effort and looking to make her Cup Series debut. Now, no stranger to NASCAR. She'd made a number of Xfinity Series starts, I believe, with Johnny Davis's team a few years ago. Of course, is active in sports cars, IndyCar, other disciplines out there. And, again, went through the same approval process as everyone else and gets the opportunity to go out there and compete in the Cup Series. Again, no problem really with somebody just kind of getting their bearings out there. And I think probably if you want to run in the Cup Series, probably the best way to do it is to run some Cup races, to at least attempt them. I think it would be a very different story if this were a situation where she hadn't been in NASCAR at all and all of a sudden just jumped over everything and got into the Cup Series. Obviously, we had a pretty good discussion about that with Helio Castroneves before at Daytona and what was happening there in the provisional system and so forth. Again, I think it's great to get, both drivers being able to compete, in the Cup Series in that situation. I think in hindsight with the Castroneves deal, I think there's probably a bit more that you can look at and be like, well, okay, it's good that he was running the ARCA race as well and not just being thrown into the situation in general. Although, again, the ARCA race had its own combination of issues there too. But I get where people were a bit skeptical of Catherine Legg getting this ride, especially with the ongoing controversy by some still discussing the Mike Wallace situation, where Wallace was not allowed to get running in the Daytona 500 or any other races this year, but apparently was still presented a path to eventually get back in there, citing the fact that he hadn't competed in the Cup Series in many years. Where's the dividing line between having past Cup Series experience, especially at super speedways, and not being allowed in, versus a driver with no Cup experience being brought into a ride? I see people's frustrations on it. I usually don't mind it because, again, I think one thing that's great with this one here, even compared to the Castroneves deal, where it was with the Trackhouse injury in the Daytona 500, where you're almost in the same status as like the camera cars at Daytona in 1990 that Days of Thunder and Paramount were using. Obviously, of course, in this case here, Castroneves was in an actual car that was competing in the race, not camera cars that would pull off in the opening laps. But it was almost treated as such because he was given this extra spot in the field based on his accomplishments in motorsports, which are, of course, nothing to just sneeze at there. You don't just have a 4-time Indy 500 winner and a driver that's competed in the IROC series as well. You got to look at that experience. That's why I didn't mind that when he got in there too. And especially the fact that his spot in the field didn't cost somebody else a spot in there. And much like this too, we had a short field in this race. Catherine Legg was the only open entry in this race. BJ McLeod's team is one of the smaller organizations out there running a part-time schedule, looking to make the most out of whatever performances, they can get out there. And, just trying for it. And, if her goal is to run more Cup races, starting at Phoenix, starting at, just any track. I don't know what her experience at this particular track is. I know that Open Wheels have competed at Phoenix in the past, but I don't know how much experience she's had there. I don't see it as really a big deal. I know people are going to be critical of how the race ended for her. ultimately, yes, she spun at the beginning of the race. She avoided the biggest wrecks of the day, then had a later altercation there coming off of turn two, collected Daniel Suarez, and still finished back in the order, I believe in 30th here. Yes, it shows here in the results. But, again, I think it really having drivers of different disciplines try to tackle, NASCAR and try to match their skills against the best drivers in the Cup Series. I think that's really the best way to do it. I think that could be really interesting because I think, again, you have a lot of drivers that have always had that interest, and they should be allowed to have that opportunity. Still have to qualify the car. You don't just say they have a spot in the field. Obviously, in this case, it worked out great for her because the field was short anyway, and hers was the only open entry. Again, it's great to see. I feel the same way about her being in there that I did when we had Jensen Button or Kamui Kobayashi or Kimi Räikkönen or other drivers here of other disciplines that didn't seem to have, the same, concern people had. And even then, a lot of the times in those drivers, even like Jensen Button, for example, driving a Rick Ware entry, driving for smaller teams. I think it was Mark Martin that pointed out that how old school this was, that it used to be, generation or so ago, that you would have drivers out there that would be able to make their Cup debut, but they would do so with small teams because, of course, rookies are going to tear up equipment. They have to kind of get their feet under them and compete as best they can. You certainly don't want them to have a negative effect on the race themselves. But really, when you see this race playing out the way it did, it was the series regulars that caused the biggest accidents in this one. In fact, some of the biggest accidents we've seen at Phoenix in a number of years. So it's unfortunate the way her race ended. Also for the equipment at the team, given that's one of the smaller programs out there. But again, I think, the greatest thing is when, everybody, all these drivers get in their cars, you don't know who's in what car. You can't tell if it's, somebody without a lot of experience or somebody that is, you just got to go out there and prove it. And even if you're a tremendous champion in another sport, this is the only way to do it. I mean, simulators can only show you so much. Running in the lower series can only show you so much. It can kind of help you lay a groundwork for it. But until you actually get in these Cup cars, that's where it's going to be really different. So I have a hard time being too critical, really, of what played out there today. Yes, she would have, I'm sure, loved to have a much better finish than she had and completed all the laps. But that's the same situation with any new driver out there. So I'd give that a lot of latitude out there. I'm seeing there's a lot of criticism about that. But honestly, it really doesn't bother me because, again, it's something else that helps BJ McLeod's team, too. Whatever the backing is. And, if they're running a race that maybe they ordinarily wouldn't have run to begin with, this could be something that helps out there. So hopefully the damage isn't too much. And we'll see if, Catherine has a better run whenever her next start is, if that's in the cards here, too. Now, again, mentioning the fact she got a 30th place finish, one big reason for that was one of the biggest accidents that we've seen again at Phoenix in a while. We had a smaller altercation earlier in the race with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and what was it? It was Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the 47 and Cole Custer, excuse me. And I kept thinking Priest, but no, of course he's not in the 41 anymore. Them spinning down the backstretch after contact from Noah Gragson. It could have been a really big situation, but it was also kind of foreshadowing what happened here. So we can pull up the replay and check in this too. Yeah, Jimmy Clements, seeing you mentioned Jennifer Jo Cobb there at the same time. Again, that was a crazy situation too. I don't know how much of that was the fact that she wanted to make a debut at Talladega, or if it would have been better if she started at over at Phoenix instead. Maybe that would have changed circumstances. I don't know. I know that Brett Bodine's involved in the driver approval process. I don't know how much of a role he has, or if there's other people that works with. Because this came up with that Truck Series driver a couple of years ago that was attempting to make the race out there, and then had some other stuff that was going on there with that. But again, I don't know what they base their decisions on, but again, it's that's something else to be looked at the same time. Let's get into this. I was going to do some big screen stuff here again. Let me see if I can get that to work. I'm going to pull this back over here, and we can kind of break this down here. May break down the finish here at the same time. Let me see. I want to get this, see if this works. Okay, yeah, stage 2 wreck. That's what we want. Let's get that. Whoop. Okay, let's get that muted here at the big time. We'll get this switched over. All right. Okay. Oh, hang on. Let's get the second screen. We'll do the race watch along catch here. Okay. So pulling up the NASCAR.com video of this. We'll mute this for now here. But again, the interesting thing with Phoenix, and I was not at this race last year, but I mean, seeing this the last couple of times, it is amazing how far these drivers spread out. I think when they reconfigured this track in 2011, they probably weren't thinking too much about having all this runoff here be used as a running lane. It's actually kind of the opposite of what happened with Darlington, where the groove is like what the breakdown lane was. But regardless, you've had like these 4 and 5 wide battles off the corners, and it was probably inevitable that we were going to have a major accident coming off one of these corners. It's pretty incredible these drivers haven't really had that situation. We've seen a couple car incidents, even in Xfinity and trucks in these here, but a real, like a big, like 7 or 8 car wreck, it seemed like, it seems at least that it's been a bit more uncommon here. I'm just moving my phone out of the way here. But let's take a look here as well. Spring Xfinity race last year at a big wreck. I'm trying to remember that one offhand, but this is definitely another one to look at. This seemed pretty exceptional, and it does involve another couple elements with this car that I think need to be looked at a bit more too. So we get a bit of a stack up here. You got Justin Haley and Chase Briscoe here in the middle. What's that? You got, okay, no, that's Ty Gibbs here, and I guess that's the 35 for Herbst behind. It just stacks up a little bit too much, and it's interesting. It may be actually after this wreck, kind of watch the restarts a lot more, and I liked actually, one thing positive on the production side with Fox. I liked when they did were these sky and blimp shots here, so you can see how the field would kind of like, give and take a little bit and try to get in line. There were a lot of close calls where this easily could have happened. But another situation where a driver ramps up over another, Briscoe's car hopping off the track there. Let's see, what was the other one to the outside? I believe that was that the 34 in this case here? I got to get the thing back to, we'll get back to the other one. I mean, just an absolute blocking of the entire track down here. Which one was that? Yeah, I guess that was the 34 on the outside. Man, Josh Berry was just in the middle of it too. His day could have just gone sideways there at the same time. Okay, much better view from this side here. It doesn't take much, but again, this is the other thing you got to really look at is these incidents, typical door-to-door contact. How many things have we seen with this car where it's something that's ordinary in NASCAR, and now suddenly it becomes something that could make it a much larger accident or a much bigger deal than it ordinarily would be. We saw situations where, minor contact would cause concussions where, there just wasn't any crushability to these cars, and that had to be looked at. Then we had the fires that were in the car that would just happen because of the long races and the rubber buildup. That was also pretty common to this sport. And now we have situations where door-to-door contact, even in closed-fendered cars, can cause these cars to just ramp over the side of somebody else. And in this case here, not quite as spectacular as what we saw with Ty Gibbs last week at COTA or some of these other races, but regardless, still creates a major altercation. This is, okay, it was Carson Hocevar to his outside, and indeed was collected in this one. But an absolute savage hit. Oh my goodness. They showed the passenger side window pop out, I believe, from Briscoe's car here. Yeah, just a big hit there. Gregson's car collected behind. This is Alex Bowman, came so close to being involved. Shane Van Gisbergen, unfortunately, unable to get out of the way of Justin Haley there on the inside. And once that happens, it just plugged the track. Brad Keselowski had nowhere to go as well. Looked like Kes was going to get back out there, actually, at one point. They actually showed him in the garage area. The crew seemed to be attempting repairs. The Max leaderboard showed him just in the garage versus out of the race. But regardless, getting steered into the inside wall would end his run there as well. Indeed, you did have the 34 of Gilliland there, not far behind John Hunter Nemechek as well. Other drivers getting on the binders. Custer getting into the outside wall up here. But just a huge field clearing wreck there as well. Definitely, it just shows that straightaway seems like it's plenty wide enough that you would have some escape paths here. But Michael McDowell, who had just come back out and was trying to clear the crash clock after having a flat right rear tire, pretty much just had to get on the brakes and just completely stop. There was just too many cars wrecked out there, too much fluid spread around, and it just made a pretty big mess out there. But yeah, again, let me cue it back a little bit more, back to the point of impact where the 19 kind of gets ramped over. So yeah, it does hop the right front off, and basically at that point, you're just completely along for the ride, and skated everybody up the track. And man, it's just incredible how many drivers were involved in this. Ty Dillon doing a good job missing it here in the 10 on the inside. He and Austin Dillon just squeezing through there too. Again, Bowman on the outside. Bowman was also very nearly collected in the earlier incident there with Ricky Stenhouse. I see that some discussion was had about that earlier too. But I think that was another one to check out. Let's see here. Let me go back to this. I want to kind of pull this up here. But fortunately, no drivers injured in this one. However, you did end up having Riley Herbst be your last place finisher. There was some kind of confusion at this point where you had this big wreck that was happening here off this corner. And usually wherever the driver, last involved in it, or wherever they were running the previous lap, that usually determines how the actual running order is going to be. But there was actually some split there where one leaderboard, I believe Max's showed Briscoe was in last, Fox's showed Hocevar in last, and NASCAR.com showed Herbst in last. And even NASCAR.com's briefly shuffled the order a little bit, and there seemed to be some confusion there. Big thanks to Jonathan Field and Jeff Gluck and others that were sharing their reports there from the track there, showing that indeed Herbst was the last place finisher, and pending, of course, the results of post-race inspection tonight, that is going to be the story for that end of the field there as well. But a crazy situation out there that really changed the complexion of the race, at least further back in the pack. Briscoe was a driver I picked to really pull off the win here, I thought, with the fact that Truex scored the last couple of poles in his career in this race last year, and the team really kind of seemed to perform well. And Briscoe, of course, winning his first Cup Series race at this track a couple of years ago. I figured that would kind of gel, but they just had a really off weekend. They didn't qualify well. First caution comes out. They get in there to get fresh tires and try to come up with a different strategy, but that strategy kept them in the back of the field. And so when this wreck happened, they're just right in the middle of it. And of course, it ended up pretty much ruining their day. So an unfortunate deal there for the drivers further back in the pack there. But some close calls there for other competitors there at the same time. The other thing that I guess we could talk about, kind of doing this a little bit out of order. Let's see. I guess we could look at the Stenhouse and Custer spin here too, even though this was kind of showing maybe, I guess, the difference in how this played out. So you get Gregson down here into Custer. Custer skating up the track. He's got a couple other cars to his outside. Looks like you got Todd Gilliland in the 34, and then there's Stenhouse in the 47. Custer comes up the track into the 34. He tries to correct, getting into the 47, hooks him across the nose, right into the 41, flicks him up the track, and so Custer gets in both the biggest incidents of the day. This is still, I know that the Xfinity program at the Haas factory team is off to a really good start this year. I know they had a little bit of a hiccup there with Creed in the Xfinity race this weekend, but Custer in the Cup ride, I'm going to be very interested to see if we see a marked bit of improvement versus his last effort in the next-gen car back during the Stewart-Haas efforts. So far, including the Daytona 500, it seems like he's just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but maybe things will kind of turn around here too. But there you go. But yep, we got these two cars getting hooked. Bowman very nearly getting involved down there. You get a much better view of that. And the 48 just getting to the left. He actually, in that shot there, you can see he just got into the right front fender a little bit. It kind of flexes. If you look kind of here, the right side of the screen, right where the 47, right there. Not enough to inflict any damage there, but given what we saw with Ryan Sieg and the damage that he sustained in the Xfinity race, just by getting the car pushed into the garage area and hitting a concrete lip in the garage, we can see that could be a serious bit of damage there as well. Let's see. Let's get to the, we need to talk about this too. Let's talk about Joey Logano and the latest of these ticky-tack penalties as the driver is going below the line there. So we come to one of the earlier restarts in this one, and Joey Logano's up there with William Byron to his outside, And, again, the rule in place at this track, which is really, really tricky to enforce, is you're in the middle of this corner, but you can't go below this yellow line until you actually have the car cross the start-finish line. Now, it seemed like, once the front of the car is across the line, maybe there's a little more wiggle room in there, but it seemed like from the latest description of this rule during the broadcast, it's like none of the car could be on the line. If that's the moment, then you're crossing it too soon. It seems that the imposition seems to be you don't want to start making that corner until you're actually past the line. Then you start diving down there. And obviously, there's a good reason to have that rule in there because, again, this is something that's a feature of this track that perhaps wasn't anticipated, even though, we're well past a decade since, this track has been changed in this way. But, you police it in such a way, too, because we saw this in the ARCA race even, that you could have a serious incident where a driver cuts it so close that maybe you can have an incident at the end of pit road, which sticks out kind of into traffic. And these drivers still flirt with that, even with these restrictions in place. So kind of looking into this at the same time, we get down to here. You got Joey Logano to the inside. So far, everything's fine. You're just kind of following the line around the track here. But then you get down to the start-finish line, and there's the offending part of it. So if he started making the turn now, when he's already past the start-finish line, no problem. But as you can see here, the left front is already below the line. And, the 77 behind him is not on the same angle here either. He's probably riding the line, but he's still staying in there, coming to the stripe. And ultimately, he wouldn't be penalized in this either. I thought when this came up, I thought they were going to snag both of them there. But there's a couple of replays. Hopefully, they're in this video that should give a better indication. There was kind of a reverse angle that showed it better. Let's see if they they're rewinding it. It's so close. But if you have, this is, I guess, a good shot here as any. Coming down to the stripe here, left front wheel is already on that stripe. You can see, very different from the 77, where you can see the stripe next to him there. He's not down there on, Hocevar is, that is. Logano's already starting to make that turn short of the line. I'm sure in the moment, when you're in the driver's seat, it doesn't feel like you're that. It feels like you're already past the line and doing it. And yeah, I mean, you're already kind of looking there because you don't want somebody else, especially Hocevar, I guess, trying to jump out behind you and do something crazy. We saw that altercation between Ross Chastain and Chase Elliott at this track a few years ago kind of unfold in a similar manner. Let's see if there's a reverse angle or like a sky cam or something that showed this, didn't they? I don't know if that gets shown here. It's probably just got the response to the penalty here. Let's take a look. Okay, it's just got him responding to it. They should have a better angle of it. I thought there was another one that showed it from before. But, I mean, all things, at the end of the day, is as ticky-tacky as this feels, it is something very peculiar to this track. And I think it's probably a fair assessment that you don't want everybody else scrambling out of line short of this finish line. You don't want everybody else doing it because then they're going to move it back, and they're going to do it so early that they're going to end up trying to fan out and cause, a big accident. Remember, we're not too far away from the Truck Series race that everybody always circles and says, oh, this truck race was terrible. The one with Hocevar and Heim and everybody running over each other. A big part of that was the restart zone was in the wrong spot. So therefore, where drivers fanned out was in the wrong spot. And you had a lot of altercations that happened in the dogleg. So really, if it's something that's going to, restrict the number of accidents that you're going to be having in this portion of the track, I don't have a problem with it. It sucks for Logano because it pretty much ruined his race. He tried to get back up there. Phoenix is a track much like New Hampshire where it's just such a short event that anything that happens, it's just going to really mess things up. And it's very uncommon to have drivers rally back. Although we did hear, and I don't know if this is confirmed yet, that we had, the situation with Michael McDowell where he came back out after having the flat tire, losing multiple laps, failing to meet minimum speed twice. He actually failed to meet minimum speed, reached it. NASCAR withdrew a black flag. He still went into the garage area because he had cleared the crash clock before that, got more repairs, went back out there, and then reached scored what was at the time, at least with about, I think, 20 or 30 to go, the fastest lap of the race. We'll see if that gets shown in the results here, if that turns out to be the fastest. But regardless, a fine story. At least they got something in their back pocket after what was a pretty lackluster day for all three of the efforts there at the Spire Motorsports team. But yeah, Logano making this move down there, I think under the letter of the law, it's an infraction there. Under the spirit of it, we could argue that one way or the other, but I think if it's something that's preventing a lot of crashes down there, I don't see a problem with that. Now, I'm seeing people in the comments mentioning, yeah, Denny Hamlin in that Richmond situation. Yeah, exactly. CO car dude, you're absolutely right. That should have been called, and it was broadcast terribly as well, so that we didn't really get to see even that restart in the moment. But once there were replays of it, it's like, okay, it's so clear it was a jump. And I have to I have to catch myself sometimes because I'm so used to kind of the older broadcast where you see somebody catching somebody sleeping on a restart. It's like, well, wait a minute. This even got mentioned, I think, in the Xfinity race yesterday. And it's like, well, wait a minute. It shouldn't be. That's not the rule. You don't catch somebody sleeping anymore. You got to restart in this zone. And in that, the whole point of that is to prevent a situation where somebody jumps to start. And yeah, the Denny Hamlin one deserved way more scrutiny. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have, Denny admit that he jumped the start or something like that? No, that's not going to happen. And, here we are a year later. And so, it's unfortunate. As we talked about with the caution flags that happened on the last lap, bad calls still happen. And that's just, unfortunately, that's just a part of it there. We just hope for a better ruling on it. But it's surprising to see NASCAR catching on to this one here when it is so close as it is. It's close, and I don't blame him for being upset. He does, I think he's certainly entitled to that. Yeah, again, I think that was just another part of that there too. Let's see. Let's get to the finish of the race here as well. We'll jump into that clip because I think that's worth looking at here too, and just kind of how this set up. Okay, I don't want that. We don't need the extended highlights here. Just going to kind of pull up. How far back does it go? Alrighty. So we'll pull up this here and do this. Hopefully you guys like the video segments on here. I'm trying to integrate this more. I didn't really do it at COTA last week. It didn't really lend itself to it, I think, with the incidents that we were talking about. But I'll try to kind of blend this into the show a bit more, because a lot of times I find myself kind of describing these things like, heck, it's probably better just look at this and point at it, because a lot of times my memory of it maybe isn't the same as exactly what happens here. So we'll see how that works. But regardless, we get down to the late race restart here. Christopher Bell to the inside of Denny Hamlin. Then you got Kyle Larson and let's see, who is that? Josh Berry on the inside? Yeah, Berry on the inside here. We'll go ahead and move it forward here. Great effort by William Byron getting to the inside of Berry there. A 3-wide effort, but Larson has the run up high. Great job by Denny Hamlin staying on Christopher Bell here as well. This was really decisive when we got down to the last lap. Kyle Busch looked like he was going to make a move, got bogged down a little bit behind Byron. Berry switching back and forth to getting to the inside of Larson and staying side by side. Whatever the tire combination is, these drivers are going to just stay locked in there. Bell dive bombs it in there. Looked like Larson was going to be able to thread the needle there in the middle. Didn't quite able to stick that at the same time. Now, this down here, I was kind of thinking about the incident last year between Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano going for the championship. Blaney trying to make a move. He tried to make a move to the inside, and it just wouldn't stick. He fouled in behind Logano, lost the race by 0.3 of a second. Hamlin, perhaps keeping this in mind, going to the outside of Bell and trying to make the exact same move that he did the previous lap where he pulled alongside. Did a great job, got the quarter panel in there, gets a little bit of help from Larson, Berry behind Larson, and they're just leaning on each other coming down here. And all's fair and love and war here. This could have very easily turned into an altercation. Great job by Hamlin staying ahead of Bell coming through here. Looked like he was going to make it stick. Maybe washed out a little bit too high. So how many times have we seen it where it's a photo finish and the guy in the outside lane seems to have the advantage, but not quite in this case. Hamlin just kind of gets right next to the wall. Larson gets in the back of Bell within sight of the finish. Could have easily hooked him here. I thought it was much closer to the finish when I was remembering it here. But again, right on top of it, Bell hangs on. Larson almost gets Hamlin for second, but hangs on to third. And Berry again with the 4th place finish. And even the battle for sixth here between, or battle for fifth rather, between Buescher and Byron, still pretty close at the end of that too. So good effort there as well. Great finish. Very enjoyable there. And again, we'll talk about this in the Xfinity race. I want to bring up the Xfinity footage here when we kind of transition into that. But again, I think there was a lot of positives from this too. So again, I think it was a solid race. I very much enjoyed it. The broadcast certainly could have been better. And I know I was getting some criticism about this here too. And this is just going to be a weekly segment, I guess, on this. It's so frustrating because I felt very much like what we saw at COTA last week. We saw a very good race. Again, some moments are going to be a bit calmer than others, but you're going to have that no matter what era you're going to see in the sport. I've seen plenty of races from even the 90s that that weren't 100% entertaining 100% of the time. That's just a part of it. There's just a disjoint in the booth, and it's really, really frustrating. And I think as far as I can see, and it seemed a bit clearer in this race, I'd say, even more than at COTA. Mike Joy is doing the best job he can. I think in general, he sounds like he has more energy than what he's doing before. The problem is that, okay, he's doing the play-by-play as best he can. He's engaging with what the story is. You could probably take most of what the race's experience is from what he's describing. Now, while he's describing it, a lot of times he'll bring up historical facts and things like that. And then Clint Boyer is just laughing at him and just saying like, oh, it's like, haha, you're old, or that kind of thing. And Boyer's just kind of laughing at whatever the other two people are saying. And it really doesn't help, because whenever Larson's laughing at whatever Harvick's saying, the two of them just don't get along. I mean, it just really seems that way. Harvick there's a certain kind of decorum where, again, when you're in the booth, it's not like you're just on the street and you're just having a conversation. I've been critical about this, especially with Adam Alexander's role in the booth, that it's a little bit too relaxed and it's not in the moment. It's not ingrained in what you're actually experiencing. And this is very similar to what we're having here, because, if you're just kind of having fun with something, instead of just, you got to stay engaged with it. You can't cut off a conversation. You don't want to make the person feel uncomfortable for engaging with you. And that one clip where, they're talking about going up in the blimp, and then Harvick's just like saying, oh, I'm going, where are you going in the blimp? It's like, I'm going in the sky. It's like, you don't do that. Don't make the other person feel embarrassed. Like, this is where I think that the issue is direction, and it sounds like I'm picking nits here, but it really does add up, because it becomes a trend over and over, and you really try to understand why it's not really working. And that's always kind of the issue here. Yeah, I think all three of these people they certainly know what they're talking about with the sport. I think that any one of them, would be, in a great position with this, but it just doesn't work. And I know that people are saying, oh, well, I don't need the chemistry. I don't care about that. Well, it really, if you want to watch the broadcast and listen to what's happening, it's going to be part of it. It's part of what you hear. And if it just sounds kind of clunky or something like that, it's going to affect your experience of it. I am still convinced that a lot of complaints about the racing, especially with this car, if the broadcast was to the level of, say, what we're seeing on the CW or what Lee Diffie has done with NBC, you wouldn't be hearing it nearly as much. You certainly didn't hear it nearly that much during those particular races. And that's where I think it's an effect. It's maybe not something that everybody's conscious of, but you hear it and you know when it's happening and you know when it's not quite right. And then it's not just the booth either. It's the direction side too. I was talking last week about at COTA, how we did, there was so much more that was happening in that race that we didn't get to see. What happened with Noah Gragson at the end? What happened with AJ Allmendinger at the end? What happened with these other drivers that we just didn't get to see? Yes, you're covering what's a very good battle up front, but maybe have a small screen that's showing what's happening to somebody else. Maybe have one of the other people in the booth not just react to everybody else's reaction to the leader, but look someplace else. There's that, all that's direction. If it's not just something they're going to willingly do on their own, that's where you got to have somebody directing them and saying, okay, well, let's try it this way this time. I received a very interesting comment during this where I was pointing this out and saying like, well, you think you can do better. And it's like, well, that's not really what it's about. What it's about is like, it's like you have to have chemistry. If you replace am I going to go in there and do the play-by-play and it's going to be better than 3 people in there? No, it's not. Come on. I'm not making any kind of statement like that. But when the chemistry isn't there. And honestly, and it was interesting too. It was a good discussion, but it was just a difference in philosophy. I believe, and I've said this many times on this show, that it's not outrageous to demand more from professionals. Professionals, when you're on a major network with millions of viewers, and you're in the public eye and you're a name, you got a podcast, you do all this other stuff out there, you're going to receive criticism, and it's going to happen. Not everybody's going to like you. And that happens and especially in these days too, where, whether it's me or it's like I'm doing these shows here and I'm putting stuff out there too. I'm not immune from criticism either. And the last thing I want to do is make it seem like, oh, well, I can't criticize them because, they're doing something that I'm not doing. It's like, no, that's absurd. That's absurd. I mentioned it on this show just last week. If I'm doing something on this show that's irritating, like, if this microphone stops working, there's a loud hum in the background, the last thing I want is people like just saying like, oh, everything's fine. It's like, and then I listen to this video, it's like, oh my God, this is terrible. Why didn't anybody say anything? That's important. I apply the same standard to myself that I do with them. And that's just what it is. And if it bothered me so much to hear criticism or something like that, I wouldn't put myself out there to begin with. That's the big thing out there, and I'm sure there's things that, they don't like about what others don't like about what I do, or I don't like what they do or anything. But again, it's a two-way street. We can receive criticism and you can decide what to do with it. Not all of it's going to be in good faith, but I'll tell you what, when it's my criticism, I'm going to do my best to make sure it's in good faith. I would much rather, if it's good, I'm going to say it's good. And if it's bad, I'm not going to BS you and say, oh, it's perfectly fine. I'm going to tell you it's not good. I'm not trying to accomplish anything else, beyond that. I just want this to be as good as it can be. Now there's a lot of problems with this car and it could certainly be better as well, but that's the other element. And I know we talk about this on this show all the time there too, but that's another part of it. So that's the big thing. Again, it's a consequence of this. I've not been doing, I can't boast the kind of career that these guys have where it's, decades of experience or being, a driver or something like that. But I can say it from the position of somebody that's been in the creative field for a very long time. There's stuff I've written in high school or in college that I've thought about sometimes like, well, it was kind of fun working on this project. Maybe I should post it and people enjoy it. But then I reread it and it's like, oh, this is awful. This is awful. Everything when you're working on something, it's important to kind of recognize how far you've advanced, and what you work on now should be better than what you've done in the past, and because you should be constantly striving for it. There's older videos on this channel that I look at that's like, ooh, that didn't sound right, or oh, the audio is terrible, or oh, the graphics don't look very good, and why is it this and why is it that? You got to learn this along the way, and it's really important. I'm sure I'll probably go back and watch this show and be like, wow, what's going on with this? Why is it so fuzzy or something? That's a part of it. And the reason that I'm so beside myself with these broadcasts is I don't sense that that's happening. Do I think that these broadcasts are the best ones, better than 5 years ago or better than 10 years ago? No, I don't. I feel like to an extent with maybe some of these, it's more or less the same, if not a little bit worse. And that's not acceptable. Especially now when, again, we have the CW really taking off and they're doing a great job, and Lee Diffie and NBC, and they're doing a great job. The paradigm has changed and people are waking up to it. And I'm so glad to see that. So yeah, it's important. And, it's hard. I will freely admit this, it's hard when you make a mistake or when you don't put out good work and people notice it and they're like, man, what's going on there? It's like, is it really, and then you retreat into the ego. I'm not above that. I'm not going to pretend that I am. I've been moments where it's like, oh man, it's like, wow, he didn't really have to say that, or, oh, he's not right. He's not right. But there's so many situations where I have that and, I just realize, wait, that's just the ego. Like, just back off on it. It's like, look, he's got a kind of point, it's like, I watch it again. It's like, that wasn't very good. And then you make the little changes and then it's better. And that's fine. Nobody should be above that. There's in social media, there's so many people that, are engaging with each other on any subject. And it doesn't mean that every one of these people are the most knowledgeable on it, but maybe you're going to encounter people that are knowledgeable about it. And, if you find out that you're on uneven ground, then just, that could be an experience to learn something about it. Some things I think, are things that a lot of people can grasp. So I think that's good too. And again, I don't want to go too far into this. I don't want to make it about myself here, but I just want to kind of put that out there because it was interesting. It was an interesting debate on that. And I do think, I think it's worthy of it. And I think that the exchange should be, again, doing it in good faith as best you can. That's certainly what I strive to do. There's times where, if it's going to be some little ticky tacky thing, I may either ignore it or maybe I'll just mention it. It's like, oh, it's kind of fun or whatever. But yeah, if it's really off, kind of like the chemistry was there today, yeah, I'm certainly going to say it. And I was not the only one thinking it. So we got some really good storylines coming through this year, and I hope they get a lot more attention. And again, this is a really, really exciting portion of it. So I want to get into the Xfinity Series race here as well. We'll talk about that. And I also want to talk about the Cartoon Network video, and we'll do some trivia here in a bit. I'm going to pop on the air conditioner here in the meantime, so I'm going to step away for just a second, and then we'll jump in here. So stay tuned, folks. I'll be right back in just a second. Oh, there we go. Had the mute on. Okay, so let me get back into this, and we'll talk about the Xfinity Series race. Now, definitely some controversy on this, at least in the finish. And this is the other thing. I mean, kind of the tempest in the teapot. I think that the Catherine Legg thing was made entirely too much of on the negative side, I think, from the race today. And I think from yesterday's race, the finish, I didn't really have a problem with it. Now, if the roles were reversed and it was a Cup guy that put it was Bowman that put Almirola in the wall, even though both of them were past, Almirola's a past Cup guy himself. Would I feel the same way? I'll admit, probably not. I probably wouldn't be happy about it, and I probably would come storming on here, and I'd say, oh, come on. It's like, why did the guy have to even be in there? Because I felt that way when Larson was in the car at Darlington, and he cost Sheldon Creed one of his many shots of a win a couple of years ago. So yeah, I'll admit that. But the way it did play out, I didn't have a problem with it because Bowman shouldn't have been in this race to begin with. But we'll go ahead and go into the finish and pull it up here because that's worthy of looking at too. Let's get this switched over. Oh goodness, we can talk about the altercation that happened in that too. Let's go. We're going to just go right to the finish here. Great Xfinity race, really enjoyable broadcast. Don't really have much notes here again from the CW. I thought Kligerman and McMurray were solid as always. I'm still trying to give Adam Alexander the benefit of the doubt, and maybe things will work. But I just think he's just so stuck in his ways, and I'm concerned about this a little bit because I'm worried that's going to be more and more of a disjoint, that you're going to just have something that's advancing on this side, and you have something that's just inflexible and not moving at all here, and that there's going to be kind of a little bit of a split there where it's just going to kind of be that, probably the best case scenario is McMurray and Kligerman just kind of take over the play-by-play more and more. Although for me personally, I think you still need to have a firm hand on the wheel and like a really strong voice doing it. Like what we saw in the ARCA race, for example, Eric Brennan out there doing another great, bang up job in that. I think if you put him in there with Kligerman and McMurray, I think again, you'd have a great job there. Give Alexander back his role that he had at the race hub. It's so terrible they got rid of that show. I know the internet is what it is, but I think that was the best place he could be. And if they could find something similar for that at the CW, I think he would really, really be good there because he's a great host. He's a great host, and not everybody can do that. I honestly think, actually, this is kind of something that's reminded me of from the broadcast today. Is anybody else a little bit concerned with Chris Myers? Like Chris Myers, I've given him a lot of latitude as being a really good host, and I think he's, again, great football announcer as well. I think it's great that he's not the play-by-play guy because he has a very, very different approach to the sport than he does with Mike Joy. But man, he's coming off a little. I hate having to handle this with kid gloves there, but it feels almost a little mean spirited isn't the right way to do it. Just grumpy, just kind of like, I know he's getting older and all that, but to me, he's kind of shown his age more than Mike Joy. I think that's kind of what I'm driving at. He just comes off, just really, he's always had kind of the everyman kind of playing it, for laughs and kind of awkward thing. You'll see this in 500 Days. We featured that in a lot of the previous episodes back when that was new, but that was 24 years ago. It's a big change there. I almost think if you put Adam Alexander, honestly, in his spot, I think that would breathe some new life in that and make that work. Actually, that could be the tide that just lifts all boats. It's I don't know. He it's like, look, I'll tell you what. If I had an interview with a Rizzler and like they're doing like the face thing and all that, I would try to lean into it a little bit more than Chris Myers was doing. I found that one really awkward. Like, especially rain delay coverage, you got to loosen up a little bit there. That's a part where, I get critical of like people in the booth just laughing and screwing around and all that. I always say, look, the rain delay coverage, save it for that. Because that's when, people like that. And there's like people, I've not enjoyed rain delay coverage, but I know a lot of people do. But that's like another part of it too. But I don't know. I'm not enjoying Chris Myers segments as much as I used to. I used to be fine with them. Much the same way as like a Bill Weber segment back when, he was active with that too. But I don't know. Lately, it's just not doing it for me. I don't know if that's just a me thing or not. So that's another one too. But anyway, let's go into the Xfinity Series finish here. Justin Allgaier. Oh my gosh. Justin Allgaier dominating a race. They showed all those replays of him getting that wreck last year when he was leading and had the flat tire. And of course, him winning the championship then when he came back to Phoenix. And having a great run there after some disappointment there in the spring. Comes back, dominates this race again. Does anybody else really like these variants of the Brandt scheme now they're featuring other agriculture on it? Like he had that tangerine car or whatever, and now he's got like popcorn on it this week. Brilliant. I don't know why they didn't think of this earlier. It's a great idea. I assume we're going to see more of this year, but hopefully that's going to help some die-cast or t-shirt sales or whatever this year. But another nice paint scheme. Terrible luck, though. Dominates the race, ultimately doesn't pull it off, and the two drivers to his outside end up settling the win between themselves here. Brandon Jones, finally good to see him have a good run. He was kind of in and around the top 5 for a lot of this race. We got to talk about our buddy Ryan Sieg here in the black car, but my goodness, right here, unbelievable battle at the front there. You got Allgaier forcing Almirola all the way up into the wall. Great run by Bowman threading the needle, admittedly. Even for a Cup Series regular, got to admit it. You got to respect the game here. That's fantastic. This move here, if he just went on and just won the race, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll give you that one. Everybody gets one. You get that one there. That's pretty cool. But ends up shuffling Allgaier back in the order, and Jones is trying to get back alongside Almirola, but really at this point, two-car battle here. Almirola seemed like he was gaining a lot in the last stretch here, but needed that late race restart to really kind of set up having anything for the leaders, and certainly this shuffled back Allgaier here as a result. But another good battle. This a little bit similar to what we saw with Blaney last year, but this time Almirola actually kind of was able to get the car to stick off the corner. I guess the Xfinity car, the benefits of the Xfinity car versus the Cup Series car here, but getting just right up there, right behind him. Seemed like he covered it pretty well. Didn't get a quarter panel in there, but does the Daniel Hemrick move and tries to get to the inside. Didn't get in the back of Bowman here coming off the corner, but you can see it looks a little bit like Almirola's car, like the back end of it's about to come around a little bit. Certainly there it is. Now you can see he's in a four-wheel drift. He's just trying to get to the line as fast as he can. I think it was just a matter of like, look, they're both skating out of control. They're about to give the win to Brandon Jones. Jones has already won at Phoenix, hasn't he? So you had a pretty crazy situation there too. Very, very difficult situation there. They end up bouncing off the wall. Jones gets even closer. Look at, he's setting up perfectly to swing by him, but just runs out of time there. Almirola gets ahead of Bowman. Again, I honestly don't have any problem with this finish here. I think this was great. I think you just had two drivers That, much as as Dr. Jerry Punch said in Days of Thunder, you had two competitive spirits that cause you conflict. That's what you had right here. You just had two guys absolutely going for it. And if you don't like that, I don't know. I don't think it excuses having a Cup guy in there, even with just him. But, again, I think if you put Raja Karuth in this car like they did before, or if you put like another driver that's up and coming and, put them in this car, if you put Catherine Legg in this car, it'd be interesting to see what could have happened there too. I've seen people suggest that maybe that would have been the better situation that happened there. It wasn't Cotton. Was it Cotton on the 7 car? I thought it was Popcorn. I didn't look at it that close. If it was Cotton, either way, nice paint scheme. I like it either way. But yeah, I thought this battle was great. I really enjoyed this. He could have, he did. He used them up pretty good there, coming to the line there. But again, you're just going for it at the same time. Would Bowman have done that to Almirola if the roles were reversed? That would be interesting to see. And if it were, again, I'll admit my bias there. I would have not looked at it so kindly if it was the opposite there. And, and again, if that happened and he just puts this other car on the wall, even though it's a Joe Gibbs car, even though it's Eric Almirola, who has a comparable, if probably actually more Cup starts than Bowman has, at least in the neighborhood of it there too. I thought this was great. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was a very enjoyable Xfinity Series race. And I think they put on a good show out there. So, yeah, he skates up the track there. I mean, there was just a little bit of room. It just used up the last of it, bounced off him, got to the finish line. And they're very lucky that Brandon Jones didn't just blast around both of them. But, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people talking about – I was surprised how negative the response was by some here about this particular accident, or about this particular finish, rather. The accident I was thinking of, we got to get into the Austin Hill situation, because this ended up settling last place here on that one. Do we have a replay of that? We should. Yes. Okay, here we go. So this was interesting. We'll get to the big screen here again. Biggest altercation in the Xfinity race yesterday. Going further back here, Austin Hill with a very unusual mistake. I actually think Austin Hill was a little too hard on himself in his interview. I mean, it's like, okay, again, you screw up. We were just talking about that. It's, it's embarrassing to really have to admit something like that, or, and step into it. Nobody wants to. But, again, these drivers, they cut these corners so close. And it was probably only a matter of time until an incident like this happened, much like, again, an incident at the pit exit, diving for the apron here. This wall, it sticks out just that little bit extra right when you're trying to setting yourself up for the steep corner here. And he just glances right off it, and I don't think it goes further back. Oh, no, okay, it goes just far enough back that you have kind of the entry of it. Comes in there, he's following Sammy Smith, maybe trying to set him up, and you can see his hands, actually. This is really good footage here. You can actually see his hands on the wheel, and he kind of just grabs at it, but it's just too late, because it's already just almost probably knocked the wheel out of his hand when he got into it. Yeah, he's kind of scrubbing it, but he can't, and the wall just comes up to him. It probably looks like it just comes out of your left field of vision there and knocks into him. And then, unfortunately, at that point, he's a pinball. And you can see he's already skating up the track. Sheldon Creed has no idea what's coming, and he just gets clobbered here, spins both of them in the wall. Very hard hit for both of them. Now, there was a lot of discussion at the same time about Dean Thompson. He's coming in from camera left here, and nose-to-nose into Hill. Very, very hard hit before both of them get into the outside wall. It was actually a very savage accident for all three of them. It seemed to be the indication that that Thompson, more or less, I don't know, had something else that went out of control and caused that particular accident. But I'm glad, and again, the CW did a good job of the replay. I don't know if the replay shows here, but it seemed to indicate that the 88 of Zilich got in the back of Thompson. Zilich was having some pit penalties early on there that kind of dropped him back in the pack, and he was kind of working his way through. I don't know if we see it here. There's Zilich's car right there, with Thompson already heading up to the wall. But there was one other replay they showed where it looked like the 88 got in the back of him. Hopefully we have that in the clip here. Looking at it again, yeah. I mean, mere inches, deciding whether it's just a really close cut, kind of like what you got with the Sammy Smith car up here, Carson Quapple there, but then deflecting into it. I mean, it's just an awful situation. It was just enough there to take him out of the event. Let's see. Okay, we already see Zilich past the moments. Do we have the other replay? Where's the other replay? Further back. I don't know if we have it here. Yeah. kind of move it forward. No, they don't really have it on there. But it looked like they had a ground level shot looking at the entrance of turn 2, or turn 3, rather. And it really looked like they actually had Zilich get in the back of the 26. That's why I went with in print for the article that got posted yesterday. So, again, a rough situation there for those drivers in the back of the field. However, let me get into this. Get into the race results. But Almirola pulls off the victory, 45 thousandths of a second, the margin of victory. So that was a pretty good deal there for him. Looking further back, I'm seeing the argument, about Almirola bushwhacking as much as Bowman is there. I take your point there, Laser Bro. But again, I have less of an issue when they don't currently have a full-time Cup ride. I know it's a narrow distinction, especially given the fact that Almirola was just running full-time Cup really not that long ago. It's one of those wobblers. It's one of those. But I feel like if you don't have that, then you're going to be critical of guys like Justin Allgaier that have past Cup experience. Guys like J.J. Yaley, who occasionally runs in there, having Cup experience. Yes, Almirola is a Cup winner, and maybe that puts another distinction on there. But again, that doesn't really, I've never really minded that much, because then you get something closer to like what we had with the golden age of the Truck Series, where you had an influx of Cup Series drivers that were kind of mid-pack or hadn't won a race but came close, and they really kind of elevated the level of that series, where it was, Ron Hornaday and Jack Sprague. Then you had like Ted Musgrave, Bobby Hamilton, of course, being a race winner, other drivers like that coming in there. And then you really had a really, really strong field competing in that series as well. Again, I don't mind that as much personally. It's much more when they have the full-time Cup ride, especially if they're winning races recently. Like if you put Byron in that car, if you just won the Daytona 500, and I know these deals come together way earlier than just in February, that always just has a bad look to me. And Bowman doesn't need to be in there either, even though he hasn't won yet this season. He's been in the mix too. There's something in the, and I think it's the Hendrick culture in general that I think is just somehow I don't see as much of an issue there with that. And again, although with Joe Gibbs back when it was Kyle, when Kyle Busch came out there, of course that was a problem because that was just getting completely out of hand. Again, I think that was kind of a different situation here too. But regardless, Almirola wins over Bowman. Brandon Jones with a great run, and we have to talk about Ryan Sieg. What a tremendous comeback that the RSS Racing team had in this race. They just were, I cannot imagine how frustrating it was that they already didn't have a great qualifying run. They were going to, start 30th in this race. But the qualifying finishes up. They push the car in the garage area, which is the old Cup garage. And their stall was the very last one on one side of it. And they pushed the car in there. There's a painted strip, which apparently indicated that there was a gap or like a bit of a rise there between a couple concrete slabs. At first, I thought it was a transition from the pavement to the concrete, because what it is it has the Xfinity garage is much like, kind of like Darlington's Cup garage, where it has a concrete patch, and then it has just kind of a roof built over it, with struts there and so forth. And it's just open air. It's not like a garage building, like built out of bricks or anything like that. And so you have a transition from the pavement of the infield to the concrete of the pad in the garage area there. And I thought at first it hit that, but it turned out that there was actually a different pad that had raised up a little bit, and somebody painted a strip. Perhaps I'm going to fix that at some point. I'm going to be very interested to see if that's any different in November. But regardless, Ryan Sieg's car gets pushed in there, hits that spot, and just destroys a good chunk of the front splitter. It's amazing how sensitive these cars are, even as how durable that piece is, and when you're out there racing and so forth. To have that happen in the garage area must have been just terribly frustrating, especially with just a couple of hours to the race. They unload a backup car for the RSS team. They have to get the seat adjusted. They have to get everything ready. They have other Ford teams that were helping them out. Just a mad thrash in there. Great job by everybody that was covering this. There were so many people that were sharing the pictures. Where was it? I want to give them a shout out here on this as well. Let's see. Kind of checking this here. Looking at, okay, this is still today. Where's the Saturday race? Ryan Sieg's team, of course, had their own post on this. Looking further back. Okay. We'll get into the last place battle on this here as well. I'm seeing, of course, the posts on this. Eric Jr. Racing was tweeting this. It was Eric Jr. Racing at Eric Jr. Racing on Twitter there, posting the pictures there of the 39 car with that incident there. Those even get posted on the broadcast, so that was really good too. Glad that that was getting covered, and then showing that this backup car out there, low expectations. This is a track, in fact, the Phoenix track. I found this out while doing the article. This is a track where Ryan Sieg had never finished in the top 5 in more than 20 starts before. In fact, Sieg hasn't had a top 5 this year, although he's been right in the mix at Daytona and Atlanta and these other races. Had wrecks, just cleaned them out. He has such terrible luck, just right there with Shelton Creed in this. However, in this case here, had some bad luck there, perhaps just got it out of the way. The car gets up there. They have great pit stops, finishes in the 4th spot, did a fantastic job. They deserve every shout out possible. Hopefully that gets featured even more next week in Las Vegas, another race that Sieg very nearly won last year. This could maybe be a turnaround for them. I think they showed a lot of spirit out there, and not an easy situation for anybody to deal with. So a fine job out there for the 4th place finish there for the SciAps team in the number 39, finishing ahead of Allgaier, finishing ahead of the driver that led the most laps in this race. Allgaier leading 130 of the 208 laps, but having to settle for a 5th place finish out there. Then the rest of the top 10, Taylor Gray, Sam Mayer, Christian Eckes, Jesse Love, and Nick Sanchez, your top 10. We'll get into this race a little bit more in just a moment. I'm hearing Badger just outside the door, so we're going to have a special guest here on the show in just a moment. I apologize. We'll step away here for just a second. So hang in there, folks. Okay, all right, we are back. Let me get the mic adjusted, and yes, indeed, we have a guest again. Oh, there he goes. Oh gosh, he is all needy again today. This is Badger. For those of you who may be new to the show here, we have 74 viewers today. Thank you for tuning in. So he'll be just off camera here. Oh, okay. All right. There you go. Okay, so if you hear something moving around down here, I've got the camera moved up a little bit here. That will be what that is. So we will see here. Okay, let's get into more of the Xfinity Series race here at the same time. We're going to adjust this mic here a little bit. All right. So Taylor Gray, Sam, we just got the top 10 there. Nick Sanchez just squeezing into the top 10. Great job by Parker Retzlaff getting back into action after the DNQ at COTA. Certainly a frustrating week for the Alpha Prime team, having 2 of their cars miss the show. Brad Perez missing the race as well last week. But a nice rebound here. Retzlaff finishing in the 11th spot, showing the same promise that we saw out of him in Atlanta when he was battling among the top 5 there. Unfortunately got involved in an altercation there that dropped him further back. Then we got William Sawalich came back from the back of the field in an early penalty. Of course, yeah, Joe Gibbs racing injury. But again, I think Sawalich is going to be one of the rookies that I think is going to be really interesting to watch this year, and has already had a few strong runs here to kind of start this season off here. Connor Zilich, after the early pit miscue and then the altercation there with Thompson, ends up back in the 16th spot. Thompson, again, your last place finisher in the Xfinity Series race there as well. This was another race that actually had a lot of mechanical issues, and I know we had a lot of brake failures. Didn't really talk about that in the Cup Series segment. We did have a lot of problems with brake failure, certainly with Bubba Wallace, with a pretty scary hit to the outside wall there. Looked like Ty Gibbs was in a similar situation. I don't know what was going on with the Toyota teams there. Certainly wasn't affecting Christopher Bell, at least, short of the finish there, or Denny Hamlin. But still, a couple of issues kind of reminded me more of what we saw at Gateway with failures there. But in the Xfinity Series race, much more kind of electrical or fuel pump failures. That seemed to be the situation. The first driver that was caught with one of these was Thomas Annunziata for the Cope Family Racing Team, which, like Parker Retzlaff, failed to qualify last week at COTA. Came back trying to have a good run out there. They had the Ashurst Honey Company out there, which is a great backer of the Cope family. They actually sponsored some of the old number 70 cars from a couple of teams ago. I guess the, what was that? I was thinking Identity Ventures, but that wasn't it. But it was another Cope, I think it was just Derek Cope Racing back then when they acquired that number from the Mary Louise Miller team. And then also they have even sponsored Starcom Racing's team as well. They always come out there in Phoenix. So it's good to see a returning sponsor, especially with the team, get back out there. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the car that much because he spent about 21 laps in the garage area for an early issue and was able to climb back after the altercation we just saw on screen, dropping him, raising him up the order here once again. The other driver that had problems about the same time, Anthony Alfredo's car stalled on the track, then stalled on pit road, had to get pushed to the garage area, forced a caution flag. Ryan Ellis went to the garage area. I believe it was a fuel pump issue on the number 71. So you had all three of these cars in the garage area. It looked like they were going to be the ones contesting last place. But one by one, all three of them got back out there. Great job by all three of those teams, whether it's the Derek Cope effort there for the 70, the Mario Gosselin DGM Racing XJIM effort there for the number 71, or again, the Randy Young's Motorsports effort there for the number 42. They still finished 32nd through 34th, but it's still a better run than they would have had ordinarily with the attrition that happened. I did tweet out earlier this week about the Mike Harmon Racing Team looking for a sponsor for Dawson Cram for Phoenix. I don't know what else came through. I didn't hear back from the team if any other sponsors came on board. The Save22.net sponsorship is still something that's like an ongoing deal there with the 74, but they still had some openings there for some additional backers. And my understanding is that they still have additional sponsorship openings for Las Vegas in this upcoming week here as well. If you want more information on that, you can check out my tweet that I put up on social media here and check out the Mike Harmon Racing effort out there. But unfortunately, Dawson Cram in his first start of this year, Parker Clearman did a nice job mentioning him in the broadcast there. But unfortunately, a brake failure on that end actually was the reason that the 74 ended up hitting the outside wall. So that was a terrible situation there. Looked like it was just going to be a flat tire, but came down the track and hit the outside wall. Good to see him get out of the car okay. But unfortunately, much like they had an incident at Pocono last year, a costly incident there for the 74. We'll see what their situation is for Las Vegas and going forward. But they end up finishing up in the order. Cram ends up 35th ahead of the three drivers eliminated in the wreck we just saw moments ago there with Sheldon Creed, Austin Hill, and Dean Thompson, your last place finisher. This would be Thompson's first last place run in Xfinity, just as today it would be Riley Herbst's first last place run in Cup. And I was thinking maybe this would be the first last place run for the 35 since the Tabasco fiasco, but actually it's been much more recent, as I posted on social media. In 2015 at Darlington, Cole Witt finished last in the 35 for Front Row Motorsports, and that was the most recent one. So it's been almost a decade, but regardless, still pretty rare. I think it's about 11 last place runs for Cup in the number 35, so kind of an unusual deal there. But that's kind of the way things were looking there, too. I like that Garrett Smithley had an onboard camera. We even got to see him battle his teammate Nick Lights for moments there. Lights, unfortunately, brought out the last caution when he wrecked into the outside wall there at the start-finish line. But we did get that crazy finish, so I guess, you take a little bit of the good and bad at the same time there. Matt DiBenedetto had mechanical issues there on the Viking Motorsports entry. Had an unscheduled stop that dropped him a couple laps off the pace at the beginning of the race. Really only got one of those laps back there by the finish. So hopefully you can, actually it shows him 3 laps down here. So really still kind of stayed far back in the order there too. Let's see. Looking at other drivers in the field here, it was good to see Carson Kvapil has been impressive. I'm glad he's still getting attention, especially after that great toe-to-toe battle with Zilich last week. This one here, he ends up back in the order in the 26th spot here. But Brendan Poole in the top 20 in the 17th spot, just ahead of Kyle Sieg. Kyle with the great Arizona flag paint scheme there on the number 28. Trying to see any other drivers really stand out in this order here. Ryan Sieg kind of definitely stole the show there, I think, in that regard. Yeah, that's probably about it there at the same time. So let's see here. Inspection is complete. Okay, we do have a call on that. We'll go ahead and pull that up here in the meantime. It's a good transition. And we'll go ahead and jump into that. Let's see. Hang on here, folks. We'll just get this pulled up here. And there it is. Yes, indeed. 6 minutes ago, posted on Pockrus's list here. Tech is complete. No issues. Bell is the winner. No cars to R&D. So, yes, thank you, Charles Peterson, for the heads up on that, as well as others. I think it's just you on that. So, thank you again for the heads up there, Charles. And we do have that. So, congratulations to Christopher Bell for the victory. And this will be a Riley Herbst article, I guess, unless the results got scrambled again. Let's take a look there. No, it shows Riley Herbst on the unofficial results here that Pockrus tweeted. So it looks like that was correct. Yeah, kind of crazy that it turned out so different. Usually when you have a multi-car wreck, you have the potential of that. But the rules seem pretty clear. I think if you're further back in an accident and you end up getting involved, that's a big one. Probably the best example I can think of, 1990 July race at Daytona. There was that famous wreck where you got Greg Sachs, Derek Cope, and Richard Petty are going 3 wide, and they all just wreck out of 4th place, and the entire field just piles in. Like, there were maybe only about 7 or 8 cars that maybe escaped this. And one of the cars that was involved, it was down to Terry Byers and Phil Duffy, who were in like the last couple of spots. They get into the back of the field there. Duffy slows down, isn't involved in the accident, comes out with maybe like a top 20 finish. Terry Byers doesn't slow down, piles right into the side of another car there at the last second there, and he's in the accident, and Byers ends up being your last place finish of that. That's just what happens, even though it's a wreck that happened in the second lap of the race, I think it was. So some races turn out that way. Some last place battles turn out that way. Others, it takes a bit more time, like today's did too. So that'll be another thing. And yes, Bell looking for 4 wins in a row. That'll be interesting. And this is something I didn't talk about really at the beginning of the show here. You want to talk about motivation. Let's not forget what happened in Las Vegas last year. Not just the fact that Ryan Sieg missed out on an Xfinity win, but then on the Cup Series side, Joey Logano pulling off the victory there ahead of Christopher Bell. Logano getting to the next round there, just right from the get-go. But Bell catching him and just running out of time. Like, Bell seemed to have the winning strategy, was tracking him down. Seemed like it was going to catch him. Seemed like Logano was just going to be just running on fumes. And just couldn't get there. And it ended up being Logano. And, of course, we know what the rest of the playoffs ended up looking like at that point. I'd say of any of these races that, that Bell could win, this is one where he's going to be absolutely loaded for bear. Now, whether or not he actually does win, who knows? Again, certainly the way things turned out last year with pretty high stakes, as a factor in it there. That was one way, but this is going to be really interesting to see. So if he gets redemption there, and I hope they market it that way as for the broadcast, because I was surprised it didn't come up really in today's broadcast. It's like, let's not forget what happened last year, because that was a real mess. But we'll see if that's going to be the situation or not. And then, if it's 4 in a row, 5 in a row is even more rare. Harry Gant couldn't quite do that. He had a seal fail on something in his car, like it was a 5-cent part at North Wilkesboro. Dale Earnhardt got around him, and Mr. September just couldn't quite get it to one more week, despite a incredible run that he had at age 51 rather. That's going to be really interesting to see. So we'll see if that's going to be the story coming up here, and we'll see who finishes in last. That was the thing I had concern coming into this. I was really kind of going into this one thinking like, okay, the driver wins a couple races earlier in the year. Are they going to get 3 in a row? I have a real hard time with it because I always remember 2009 when Matt Kenseth won the Daytona 500 He won Fontana. The 500 was rain shortened, but Fontana was pretty convincing. And he goes into Vegas, where he's always really good. And, same track, Vegas. Yeah, wow, think about that. He comes into Vegas, beginning of the race, has an unscheduled stop, blows the engine about 4 laps into the race, out of the race, finishes in last. Could very easily happen on this one, too. So we'll see what the story is going to be. I think that's going to be really exciting here for sure, and we'll find out next week. So that'll be another one to look at, too. Death Killer, thank you for mentioning the Cartoon Network Wacky Racing series. I do want to talk about that. We'll do some trivia here at the same time. And if you guys have any other questions or anything else I didn't mention, that should be mentioned on the show here tonight, definitely let me know. I'll check my notes here at the same time. I should have that queued up because I know I wrote something down. Oh, speaking of last place finishers, I liked when Kyle Busch came out and tweeted about the fact that he finished last in his first Cup start. Technically not true. I mean, Kyle finished last in 2004 at Atlanta. He actually finished 41st in his Cup debut at Las Vegas after bouncing off the outside wall. I don't need to be actualing people during a really cool moment there, so I just stayed out of that. But I thought that was a really cool thing, and it really just shows that last place finishers, it's not always an indication of success down the road. You think of Tony Stewart finishing last in the Daytona 500 in 2002, wins the Winston Cup Championship at the end of the year. Same deal here. So I thought that was a really cool moment. I appreciated him bringing that up there too. Haven't really talked to Kyle Busch about in a last car article before there. I imagine that would be a pretty uncomfortable situation there, given how competitive he is, and understandably so. But maybe that'll be something down the line there too. The other controversy that came up, or the controversy rather, that came into this race here certainly involved Austin Cindric and the altercation there with Ty Dillon. We talked a bit about this last week, and that it was pretty brazen, when you have a driver that gets into the right rear of him and hooks him into the outside wall. Shouldn't really matter about the speed of the track or anything, although we heard a bit of a discussion about that from NASCAR this week in explaining why they just gave him a 50-point penalty instead of suspending him for a race. I think given what happened with Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott, or even further back, if you talk about the back to 2008 and the altercation between Juan Montoya and David Gilliland, a situation where Gilliland was actually parked from the race there in that case, suspending him for a race probably would have been, a wise decision. I know that weighs a lot more heavily when it comes to what the playoff rankings are and so forth. But I think for consistency's sake, that probably is what should have happened there. So I do think that was a bit of a slap on the wrist. It could have been a very serious accident there. And yeah, they were just shouldering each other. It was just hard racing. And yeah, if Cindric just came up to him and just kind of put a donut on his door and kept going, we wouldn't be talking about it. But the fact is he didn't do that. And I think that was a bit reckless. And I appreciate it was pointed out here that that Harvick even discussed that during the Fox pre-race. I don't watch the pre-race. I usually don't have the stomach for it, but apparently this came up, and I appreciate him mentioning that. So again, kudos to Harvick there on that. I think that was probably the most appropriate description of this at the same time. Mentioned Eric Brennan, the ARCA booth. I only watched a bit of that, but he did a fine job from what I saw there too. I know there's more developments in the NASCAR lawsuit. The thing I think is most interesting with that is we actually have a bit of a discussion here about, okay, how much notice did the teams get? We'd heard from 2311 and Front Row Motorsports that they basically were just given this thing to sign just out of the blue, that they had to sign it in a matter of hours, minutes, whatever the deal was. There was not enough time to properly review it and sign off on it. That part, again, I'm glad that NASCAR actually responded to this, not knowing, again, we still don't know what the full story is. This is why you have a trial. You got to have everybody present their evidence and just see, who actually has, the stronger case, of course. But, if it was really as NASCAR describes it, that there were many years of negotiations and that they really were trying to work something out. And, I guess probably the argument is, was this thing that was sent out, assuming it was just within a couple hours to sign it, was this something that everybody else signed off on, said, okay, yeah, we'll sign off on that? Or, was it a situation where the teams wanted to have additional negotiations and just protested by not signing it and then, did that? That's where it gets really interesting. And I'm glad we're kind of boiling it down to I think that's a critical moment in this, because I think it really does change the character of what this actual debate is even about. And again, I don't want to go too far into say like, one side or the other here. I just think it's additional info. I'm glad it's additional information. Hopefully we'll get some more response here from the team side of it here, and just say, okay, well, what were the nature of those negotiations? I think we're kind of getting down to what's kind of the central conflict here. So, again, there's a lot of complexities to this that need to be brought down. But if we're talking about the actual contract negotiations and what was happening along the way, and who knew what and who agreed to what, we're starting to kind of get that direction. So I don't want to go too much further down the road on that, but hopefully we'll get some more information. And I think that'll be something that'll be worth definitely more of a discussion coming up here as well. Yes, Jimmy Clements, thank you for mentioning that as well. Think about Mexico City. This is another thing I don't want to go too far down the road on, because I don't know how clear that rumor was. There were questions about the Mexico City race, about it still being on or not. As a matter of fact, as I'm streaming right now, I'm just seeing more banner ads about selling tickets. As far as I know, it's still happening. And anything else that's to the contrary, I don't know I don't know the first thing about that. We'll see what, we'll just have to wait and see. And again, I saw the post out there as to the legitimacy of it or anything else. I really don't have anything else to add on that. But we're down to the last couple of months there to kind of, before that. So if there is any other information, I'm sure we're going to be hearing about that soon. So, we'll see. Let's see here. What we got? What failed in Harry Gant's car? I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was something with the brakes. I think it was like a brake. I got to look it up. I should have my 40 years of stock car racing on hand here when I do these streams. I usually have it. I have it over by the TV there, but I need to pull that up. Let's see. Harry Gant. I got to look it up. I do have to look it up. It's unlike our trivia segment here. Let's see. Yeah, brake. It says a brake failure, at least for the Wikipedia page, but let me see if there's any. Revisited. Let me check a different feature on this here as well. Darlington. Okay, hang on. Let's go down to here, September 29th. Fourth sounds better. It was faulty brake line. It says caused to lose fluid for the final run to the checkered flag. So kind of what we saw with Tyler Reddick today in the Cup Series race. You can see how much that can hobble somebody's performance out there, and especially a track as exhausting as North Wilkesboro. At least according to NASCAR.com. I remember it was a brake issue, and I remember reading somewhere that it was like a really, really small part in the brake system, whereas if it didn't fail, he would have pretty much just cruised to win over Dale Earnhardt, and that would have been it. But Earnhardt was the streak buster in that race too. How much longer that streak would have gone, I think that's really kind of an interesting thought too, especially given how good he was on the Xfinity side on top of it, winning a number of Xfinity races. Yes, as much as I'm not a fan of Cup guys in Xfinity, and I probably wouldn't have been a fan of it even back then either, because the Skull Bandit car is just a much better paint scheme than what it. The 33 just looks better than the 7 there that he ran in the Xfinity side. I guess he ran Skull on that car too, but regardless. What was the next race after that? I think it was Charlotte. I mean, he would have been good there if that was the case. Yeah, Charlotte. Yeah, Jeff Bodine won that race, but Gant would have been very good there. I think he had he won there before, didn't he? I thought he did. I have to kind of look that up. This is where I get into a rabbit hole on Racing Reference, just like usual. Yeah, okay, he did win once. Yeah. When was that? He won in 82. Wow. Okay, there you go. So that goes way back. That's back in the Buick days there. Yeah, very early on that stretch there. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought he seemed to win there before, so that could be another one to look at too. An O-ring. Okay, thank you, Glenn 7000. Yeah, that makes sense. Something small like that. Something, small but important. For sure. That would get you a leak for sure if that's starting to fail. So that would be another one to look at. Let's see. Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and do the trivia portion of this here too. Let's see here. Alrighty. Okay, so let me bring this out here. Let's see, not that one. Okay, so NASCAR pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card are the categories. Go ahead and let me know which category you'd like. NASCAR pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So I do not have anything for show and tell today, but I do want to talk about the video coming up here on this channel. I've been very excited about it. I know I've been teasing it for a long time here, but you can see why. I really wanted to wait to get that actual trailer out there. This is distracting me. Let me close this. I really wanted to make sure to kind of get that actual trailer out there and be able to share this with everybody. So this is a video I've been working on for the last couple of months as well. I had this kind of alongside the latest episode of 500 Days on the Spring Martinsville race. And this is a history of Cartoon Network Wacky Racing and their involvement in the sport, which covers a very interesting period in the sport's history from 1996 through the 2000 season. And it covers 3 different teams and I believe about 9 different drivers, 2 of which I was able to interview for this project. Those being Jeff Green and, of course, Jerry Nadeau, who my fandom is very much clear on this end here from the video that I did back in 2019. Been meaning to do another project with Jerry for a while. This was a period of his career that he was very happy to kind of cover again there. He really enjoyed his time driving for the Melling team between 1998 and the midway through the 1999 season, which is covered in this video here. This is going to be, this is a very interesting project there that I think is going to be, I hope it turns out well. And again, in keeping with what I was discussing earlier, trying to make these, you know, again, try to put more effort into these even more to kind of make it, you know, more engaging, which is really important because in this video here, it's going to be 3 parts and the 3 parts together are about 4 hours of content. So there's going to be a ton in here, but it's going to involve 4 different interviews. So again, the interviews with Jeff Green, who drove for the Cartoon Network team when it was at Diamond Ridge, Jerry Nadeau when he drove for the team at Melling, as well as Scott Savatek, who is a big-time collector of Cartoon Network memorabilia. He was able to contribute some pictures from his collection, as well as interview himself. And then another person named Brent Martin, who was very much involved in the overall graphic design of this team. And he's got I don't want to say too much on that, but there's some very, very cool stuff that I have from that's going to be a part of this video too. This on top of some excellent pictures, again, provided by Brian Hallman over at the BRH Racing Archives. He always adds those great historical pictures from the race team and the drivers along the way, which is really important in this one, as there's many drivers that are featured in this program too. So big thanks to him as well. That's going to be a part of this project. There's been a lot of different strings to kind of pull to kind of get this going together here. I'm still working on adding the video elements in there to kind of bring that in. But what I'm planning on doing is having it be a 3-night event rather than a 3-week event like I did with After Allen. And I'm going to I'd love to get that out sometime by the end of this month. Now, those of you who are in the $5 and up levels of the Patreon, we did have a couple new members join this week, so big thanks to them joining there as well. You will be able to see all 3 parts of this video, so you can binge watch the entire 4-hour thing if you want, before part 1 even airs on YouTube, so before it premieres, rather. So that's going to be something that's going to be coming up here very soon. Again, big thank you to everybody in the lastcar.info Patreon. Still going to be working on getting the magnets set up there for the upcoming trip when we do the coverage at Rockingham and Talladega. Basically, after this video is done, that's going to be my next thing to focus on there, is getting ready for that. I'm making some arrangements to hopefully do some very exciting stuff there on top of covering the action at Rockingham and Talladega. So definitely stay tuned to both this channel and my Twitter feed at Last Car on Brock there. But this is going to be a very interesting video. And yeah, 4 hours, yeah, I'm surprised too. I didn't even know where, you know, I mean, where this came up here at the same time. But it really turned out that way. Each of the parts are going to be different links there as well, which I think will make it more digestible here. But there's a lot to cover. I was kind of amazed at how much material was out there and how much coverage this team actually got, or this program really got, between the different teams. But, you know, this is something I've been meaning to work on. I didn't anticipate it, of course, having such, I mean, I don't want to say if it's good timing necessarily, but it's certainly a time where, a lot has kind of been in the news here. Of course, I never watched the Jellystone show that I guess is on Netflix. Apparently, they had their finale this week, and there was a lot of discussion on social media about that. There was that live action version of the Powerpuff Girls with this awful trailer that got put out there. That was a show that I really enjoyed growing up, especially back in college. And of course, was a feature of one of the paint schemes in the series. Seeing that ended up kind of dominating social media later this week. And then, of course, the passing of George Lowe, the voice actor that did Space Ghost back during the Space Ghost Coast to Coast show. Rest in peace to him. He was actually featured on one of the pictures that was shared with me from Brent Martin's collection. That was the picture I shared of the rear tailgate of the Cartoon Network Wacky Racing Hauler. I believe this would have been the 96 version of it there. I completely forgot that that character was even featured in the character design of the program back then. But actually, I noticed from a diecast version of the hauler, it actually had that on there as well. So obviously didn't anticipate all that kind of happening in the same week here. But once it did, I was like, okay, well, this seems like just as good a time as any to share this trailer and put out the Hanna-Barbera characters is going to be a part of it. So it's going to be a very interesting story. I think I really tried to work out of my comfort zone a little bit on this, where it's not just simply what happened on the racetrack. We're also talking about what was the history of Cartoon Network itself. What was, why were these certain shows featured on the cars versus others? Kind of the role of other mergers and acquisitions that were going on with Turner Broadcasting. All of this is going to be in the video there as well as where we find ourselves really since then. And the nature of the changing sponsorship dynamic. This is something that's very much connected to what I talked about in the Country Time Lemonade video last July, where you kind of went this transition from cigarettes and beer to kind of more grocery store products. I mean, again, wearing the Kroger shirt, perfect example of it right here. So now you kind of get products that, in grocery stores. You got teams that are bringing out show cars for young families to see, things of that nature. That transition continued to happen. You think about the Family Channel. When I mentioned that in After Allen, that was another step in this process as well. And then really beyond this, then you get Cartoon Network in the late 90s. And just really kind of continuing that story. So if you want to see something that kind of lead into this video while you're waiting for this to get finished, and believe me, I'll still be working on it here tonight here. The time change has not been helpful in this, I'll tell you what. But in the meantime, if you're looking for something that's going to be a good refresher to kind of lead into it, I would highly recommend checking out my Country Time Lemonade video on this channel, as well as After Allen, particularly the second and third parts there, which track the rise of the Family Channel involved in the sport too. So this is going to be something that I think is going to be very enjoyable. It's been a blast to work on. I've had such a hard time not talking about it here on the channel, but I wanted to make sure it was a trailer that would announce it, especially with the different people involved in this. So again, a lot of people have been helpful on this here, and can't wait to get it out there. So again, hopefully at least starting the Patreon access at the end of this month, I think is probably the most conservative goal. And then getting it out definitely before we do the Rockingham and Talladega trip in April. That's kind of what we're looking at here at the moment. It just entirely depends on how long it takes to get the graphics coming up here at the same time. So yeah, that's going to be another thing that I'll be working on here at the same time. So I think that's about all the other notes I had on this. I'll go ahead and check the chat here at the same time, and we'll cover that too. Yeah, the Country Time video is only 45 minutes. I thought I was going to have more content on Country Time, but it's actually harder to find commercials and promos and stuff like that. And I think that's another good example of just, again, how the sponsorship world changed. And this is very much in a time where I was just kind of getting into the sport too. I actually don't have a very clear memory of 96 or 97. I kind of was out of the sport a bit during that time period. So it's kind of been a good refresher for me in that sense there too, to kind of see what that era was like too. So yeah, so it's going to be an interesting situation there too. But we'll find out if just checking the chat here too at the same time. Yeah, I've seen some confusion over the Powerpuff Girls live action thing. Yeah, it's apparently it was canceled and somebody posted it and then somebody took that clip down, but it's still everywhere on the internet. If you want to see it, it's there. But if you're a fan of the show, Yeah, it's not enjoyable for sure. It's probably good that it got canceled. Let's see here. I'm seeing a lot for drivers. Looks like, yeah, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 for drivers here. Is that it? I think that's about it. So yeah, we'll go ahead and do some drivers questions here, and that'll probably do. I feel like more displays in grocery stores put more eyes on the sport, Zachary. Yep, I agree. Absolutely. I think that would be a big help. I think that, there's a great video. Stapleton 42 put out a video of that tour of, gosh, what was the guy's name? The guy's collection. He just has a massive collection. And it's amazing what big portion of it is, not just parts of the cars and parts of racetracks, but also like actual merch that was produced and like stand-ups and stuff that were used in grocery stores. It really does illustrate like how important it is to get the sport that much attention. Where was it? I have my favorites list should be here. Where is it? Is this alphabetical? No, it should be right here. Phil Combs, that's right. The Phil Combs collection. I've been having to watch that piece by piece for probably the last week and a half because there's just so much stuff in it. Like I just get pulled into it. It's pretty much been my lunchtime video here. I still got another 20 minutes of it. I think I got to watch. That one's almost 2 hours right there. So very enjoyable. If you haven't checked that out, I'd recommend that too. But that would be another one. Yep, Ted Musgrave and Jeff Bodine both ran with Family Channel. Yep. And that's another thing that's going to be kind of part of this video too. We need to kind of tie all that together. So it's not entirely coincidental to bring up those topics here at the same time. Sorry, Badger's waking up a little bit down here. We got a lot going on here. So, all right, you doing good, buddy? You doing good? You wanna see the people again? There you go. There you go, buddy. We'll do some driver questions here in just a moment. Just making sure he's good here in the meantime. You didn't want to stay asleep last night. You good, buddy? You good? You good? Oh, gosh, he's all tired. We'll get you something to eat here in a little bit. You good? You good? No, I don't have anything up here. Okay. Probably going to see these ears. Yep, you can see at the bottom of the screen there. You'll probably see those at the top of the bottom of the screen there, too. All right, he keeps looking at me. Don't look at me like that. Come on, buddy. All righty. We'll do a couple drivers' questions, then we'll wrap up. Oh, gosh, we're almost at 2 hours anyway. Okay, there you go. Now you breathed into the microphone. All right, we'll do a couple questions to wrap up for the evening here, folks, in the drivers category. Oh, nope, sit down, buddy. You can just sit there. Okay, you'll probably see him on the screen here, but that's okay. All righty. Let me turn the mic this way. Let's do that. There we go. Let's see. Okay, here we go. What racing legend drove car number 40 in his 1961 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? What racing legend drove car number 40, 40, not 14, 40, in his 1961 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? Don't look it up. Try to guess. Get a drink of water here, too. I don't remember if I showed you guys, but I do have the Mountain Dew Code Red sticker on the water bottle here. There you go. Got a couple of fun ones here. We got the RFK Racing 1-2 finish at Daytona. We got your Wheelie Yellow here. Got the Bills sticker. So, yeah. And, of course, the ketchup logo on that. Did I show the rest of this? Yeah, there we go. There's Tyler Hill's truck, the Wood Brothers. It's kind of going for a reddish motif on there, so it's always fun. Alrighty, let's go back to the question here again. What racing legend drove car number 40 in his 1961 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? I guess is for Pearson, Bobby Allison, Yarborough, Fireball Roberts, Curtis Turner. All good guesses. All good guesses. Yeah, Phoenix actually did have a good race. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I enjoyed this race. I enjoyed COTA. I thought another thing I didn't talk about with the Xfinity Series race, I mean, when you almost pretty much had a 4-car battle for the lead, just like we saw at COTA last week on the Cup Series side. I mean, that was just great. Really enjoyed it this weekend. It was very relaxing. Hopefully we have a good action this next week. We got a triple header. We got the Truck Series coming back after a couple weeks here. Next few weeks are going to be triple headers, actually. So it's going to be a lot of action and a lot of last place finishers to track here at the same time. So stay tuned for that. What racing legend drove car number 40 in his 1961 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? The answer is Bobby Allison. Bobby Allison. Charles Peterson, you got it. Ultimate 23 Dragon, I think you were the first to get it. Yep, there we go. Okay, Badger's resting his head on my arm here. Ultimate 23 Dragon, Charles Peterson Jr. You got it there? Yep, 40. There you go. Yeah, it was an unfortunate deal there for Leg there at the same time. I mean, again, it was a tough situation. I mean, this is not an easy track. You got the regular versus the option tires. You got a small team. You got limited Cup experience, not limited NASCAR experience. That's what, again, I think that really needs to be hammered home, that she has, recent Xfinity Series experience, that she's competed in sports cars, so she's competed in fendered cars before here too. Again, I would I give her the benefit of the doubt on that. This isn't just this is not a I don't think that controversial of a situation. It's an unfortunate outcome for sure. And whether or not she gets more starts, I think it's another conversation to have, but we'll see. Okay, we're looking for a number on this one. How old was Dale Earnhardt when he won his first NASCAR Winston Cup title? How old was Dale Earnhardt when he won his first NASCAR Winston Cup title? She was in the ARCA race at Daytona. That's right. That's right. Good point. Yeah, so there you go. That too. Alrighty. How old? So what age was Dale Earnhardt when he won his first NASCAR Winston Cup title? Don't try to look it up. Try to guess it there as well. Badger, he just keeps looking at me. Look at me. I'm going to bring the camera down here. Okay, maybe the cord's a little too short. There you go. Oh, there he is. There he is. What a majestic creature. What a majestic creature you are. There you go. There you go. He's so happy to be here. You can tell. Okay. All right. Come on, buddy. There we go. We'll just do a couple more questions here. Then I'm going to have to probably take him outside here in just a minute. There you go, buddy. Let's see. How old was Dale Earnhardt when he won his first NASCAR Winston Cup title? The answer is 29. 29 is the correct answer. Ultimate 23 Dragon. Yep. There you go. You were jumped on it there, too. Charles Peterson Jr. Looks like you were the first one. You got it right out the bat. 29 is correct. Jimmy Clements as well. Glenn 7000. See, everybody's right around the same range. You all weren't too far off. Well, again, I don't think anybody realistically expected Catherine Legg to win that race. And again, it's a tough situation. I saw BJ McLeod struggle with that 78 car, at this track. And, it's a difficult situation when you're driving for a small team. But it used to be, that's how you earned your stripes. It didn't used to be that you got a really top flight ride. The Shane Van Gisbergen deal is a very different situation, very unusual one. So, yeah. Let's see. No, that one's too easy. Let me see if we can find one more good one here. All right. Oh, here we go. Here's a good question. We'll just do one more question here for this evening, and this will wrap things up for the evening here as well. Oh, I need to do super chats. Yes, thank you, Laser Bro. Thank you for mentioning that. We'll do those as well. I'll ask this question, and while everybody's doing their answers, I'll do super chats. How about that? Let's do that. Thanks for the reminder. I do have a couple to catch up on. Thank you so much, folks. They are not expected, but they are always appreciated. Who was tied with Bobby Allison for a record 6 wins at Charlotte as of 1998? Who was tied with Bobby Allison for a record 6 wins at Charlotte as of 1998? That is the question. Alrighty. Yes, thank you for this super chats. Let me get into these here. All right, first one here is Michael Jensen. Thank you for your super chat for $5. Both races had great fourth place finishes. Ryan Sieg and Josh Berry. Hope they both can keep it up through the year. Yes, I absolutely agree. That turned out to be kind of perhaps the magic position there for this weekend there, at least a good number. I think both drivers, they could very well bring their four dark horses to victory lane this year. Berry was, again, fantastic in Atlanta, looked very good in this race today. I'd say it looked even better in this race, just because it's such a different kind of track that you really have to just handle your way through there. And then also dealing with the tire strategy, the crew was making the right calls. They were right in the picture there too. They could be they could be ones to really watch. We didn't really get to see much out of Berry last year with all the controversy that was going on at Stewart-Haas Racing and them closing down, and it just came to be a difficult situation. But regardless, I think that it's going to be something else to watch this year. And Sieg, he's been pounding on the door of a first win. It's got to happen at some point here. They got such a strong team there. They built up so much. I was very skeptical when they changed from Chevy to Ford, but it's paid off so well for them there. And they're really consistently one of the drivers that's really threatening to mix up the stranglehold that the Cup teams and JR Motorsports always seem to have on the front spot here. Badger is scratching his ear here at the same time. But yeah, I agree, Michael, and thank you for the super chat there. I think it's a great weekend for these underdogs, doubly so for Sieg for coming back with the backup car there at the same time. Didn't even have his name on the car. They didn't even have enough time for that. It was just an incredible situation there, too. Laser Bro, thank you for your super chat for $5. Let me get into this here. Let me make sure it says the whole thing on this. All right, there we go. Yep, it's kind of cool that both Arizona races are the clock change weekends. Yep, that's something that Last Bro always brings up all the time. Is you got daylight savings time starting with the spring race and ending with the fall race. It's bizarre how that works out. I wonder how much of that is a factor in their advertising, especially since Arizona doesn't recognize the daylight savings. So I think that's a lot of fun. But nice segue last week with the cartoon discussion there too. As to that, again, it's interesting. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up there at the same time. What was I? Let's see. I'm trying to think. Oh, for the cartoon discussion. You mean like the cartoon characters, like they do the cartoon driver pictures? I was just trying to make sure I understood your question there at the same time. But yeah, it is interesting. We do still have cartoons in the sport, don't we? But we just have them in the wrong places here with the cartoon graphics for the drivers. I agree. Yeah, that's not really the best spot. But bringing out the cartoons on these paint schemes back then, that's something I think more people can get behind for sure. We've had some other cartoon paint schemes that have been pretty good before, but I think these were in very much a different class. And I think this will be a good tribute to bring all that together, and hopefully it'll be something everybody enjoys. I think it's a good time to have it out there too. The springtime here, early in the early weeks of the season. I was aiming for this to be out back during when the season started. I ended up moving 500 days to that spot there, and we're still working on the next episode on that, on the spring race at Talladega. That will probably be after our Talladega trip, more than likely. I'm still working on the research for that, because that one's going to be a pretty big episode. But I think that'll be a good one to transition into when we get back there too. So again, thank you, Laser Bro, for your super chat there as well. Did my mouse stop working? Okay, there we go. Where's the scroll? Is it not scrolling? Hang on. Why is this not scrolling down? I don't want to accidentally close anything here. Alrighty. Oh, there it is. Couldn't find the little bar here. Oh, we were talking about cartoon shows last week. Oh, Laser Bro, good point. Okay, that's right. We were talking about cartoons. Yeah, we talked about that's right, because that was the show that leading into the Oscars, and we talked about cartoons a bit, and we also talked about Adventures of Pete, and we did some of that too. I know that's not a cartoon, but I mean other shows. Yeah, we talked about Nicktoons. We were talking about that too, right? Gosh, thanks for reminding me. No, that was a good discussion too. Yeah, didn't anticipate that at the time. It just kind of went right back into that too. But yeah, didn't keep my mouth totally shut. You're right. Yeah, I was kind of leading into it there that way. But perhaps that's kind of where it kind of gets noticed there too. But no, thank you for the super chat there at the same time. Because, yeah, that was a good discussion. And actually, yeah, the Oscars, I'll tell you what, the Oscars were just hilarious. I'm hearing some people say the Oscars were really boring. But, I mean, again, it's the best comedy they make all year. It's always so uncomfortable. There's always something that goes wrong or it's just awkward. Conan O'Brien was solid. I think that was fine. I'm not the biggest cinephile out there, but again, I did see The Brutalist. I thought it was terrible, and I thought it was gratifying that it lost Best Picture. Although, I mean, Adrian Brody got Best Actor, and then it was kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was. It just wasn't a very good movie, but I don't know. It has the illusion of being a great movie because of the cinematography and using VistaVision and IMAX, but it's just there's no meat there. That was kind of what it felt like to me. That's unfortunate. But yeah, no, that's kind of the way to kind of look at that too. Who was tied with Bobby Allison for a record 6 wins at Charlotte as of 1998? The answer was Darrell Waltrip. Looks like a lot of you got that. Yep, DW. I've seen a lot of DWs here. Let's see. 6'11 Hornet looks like. Oh no, Jimmy Clements looks like you were the first one. There you go. 6'11 Hornet as well. Laser Bro, you got it. Eric Kress, you got it. Death Killer, you got it. There you go. Excellent. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, no, I thought again the Oscars are just like I don't want to call it. I mean, I guess you could call it a hate watch, but I don't know. I think of it more like Mystery Science Theater. Lasper and myself, we did the stream basically when the Oscars started, so we watched it on tape delay after it ended there, which was great because we could get through the commercials. But yeah, we were just laughing our tails off there watching that that night. So that was a lot of fun. It usually is. There's always something that's just awkward there, and celebrities in that environment is just it's yeah. Again, we talked about a sense of humor last week in general, and I think that was another part of it there for sure. Alrighty. So, let's see here. I think it's about it. So we got call and inspection. We did the answer for the question here, Darrell Waltrip. I think we'll wrap up here for now. So that will do it for this week. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Congratulations to Christopher Bell and Eric Almirola for pulling off the wins here this weekend. Yeah, tremendous weekend all around. Very competitive events. Hopefully the momentum carries into Vegas. Vegas always seems to be a good track for this car. Had some good races there. Can Christopher Bell pull off his 4th straight win? Who will be able to pull ahead there in the last place battle? It's kind of mixed up right now with a lot of different last place finishers here at the same time. We'll talk about the Truck Series, Xfinity, and Cup Series races as well. So in the meantime, my Twitter feed is at LastCarOnBrock. My Patreon is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. And our next show is going to be next Sunday, about 15 or 20 minutes after the Cup Series race in Vegas. We'll talk about Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup in the meantime there too. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a safe week, everyone. Thank you again for your support. And I'll see you all next time.